times difficult morning, never more difficult than for our people out in the field. And if at times it has seemed that we were unsure of the numbers, it is only because we were unsure of the numbers. Information as these things evolve is not necessarily the easiest thing to come by, and as we get it piecemeal, we are trying to pass it along to you. But the folks out in the field did a terrific job, particularly Bonnie.
They sure did. History has a way of repeating itself, though, doesn't it? We heard this for the first time early this morning, just as you early this morning are hearing it for the first time, and my first reaction was, again? I wanted to check the TV, make sure that this wasn't a rerun I was hearing. No,
yeah, for the record, April of '83, an attack in Lebanon on the U.S. Embassy left 63 dead, 17 of them Americans. October of '83, an attack on the Marine headquarters, 241 U.S. servicemen dead. We'll come back right after a message. As we have been noting throughout this morning, we are coming to you on the West Coast live from the East, which has made it a long day for some of our excellent people in the field. Foremost among them, Andrea Mitchell, who has been standing by at the White House. We're going to talk to her momentarily. And on the front line, Bonnie Anderson, who has been standing by on an open line in Beirut all morning for the last 6 hours. We're going to check with her now for some final thoughts. And Bonnie, as you join us, what can you tell us about Ambassador Reg Bartholomew? He is hospitalized. Any further comment on his condition?
From what we understand, he is in very good condition, and he was not seriously injured. He did undergo some surgery, according to the hospital, to remove shrapnel.
Bonnie, a little bit earlier, Jane asked you a very good question, which I'm afraid we had to shortchange because we were getting some tape in. As you've been sitting there, naturally you have a very limited view of what's been going on and how it's being received and everything else. Are there any remaining questions as you sit in Beirut that you'd like answered?
There is one. At the end of July, 100 Marines who were guarding the compound were pulled out. Officials here said this is because the U.S. government was opening up 2 new buildings, one in the east and one in the west, Beirut, that had very good security, and they did not need the Marines. I wonder now whether Washington is at all considering sending back some sort of heavy troop, as this was, more than 100 with amphibious machines and heavy weapons, and whether they realize this might be, or do they realize, or they believe this could be the only way to protect American diplomats here.
We may try to get an answer on that, if not today, certainly tomorrow morning. But let me ask you, could any amount of Marines have lessened the damage of today's attack, do you think?
That's a difficult question, Brian, but one thing is that we can say is that when these 100 or so Marines were guarding the compound, they were a very tough-looking force, and they had the entire area surrounded. And it certainly, whether or not they could stop something from happening is one thing, but I think it was certainly an intimidation factor from any one truck or anything of that sort facing a much larger force.
Bonnie, a little bit earlier when you and I were talking, we were noting the breakdown of personnel and how many were over in East Beirut, and as you noted, most had moved over to there because it was considered to be a little bit safer because it was in the Christian sector. Now that also has been destroyed, what happens to our personnel?
Well, I'm sure that's a question that a lot of the diplomats here are pondering as well. The announcement of the move came about 4 days after an American Presbyterian minister was kidnapped. It also came at a time when Beirut was trying to hammer out a peace plan. While U.S. diplomats here were saying that the building in West Beirut would continue to be the main office, there is no doubt that as many as 90% of the entire staff is working in the East. All of the families moved there. Perhaps they might... what they've done in the past in situations like this is they have all the families and all the diplomats move into one central compound rather than living in homes scattered over the area, and I'm sure they're probably considering that once again.
Bonnie, as kind of a final note, and I'm not sure really if you can answer this, but I'd like to ask you to address it, though, if you might. It seems as if on a continual basis we underestimate the threat there. I say it seems that way only because it seems the United States seems to suffer most from these kind of incidents. Is there a particular reason for that? Do we underestimate the threat?
Once again, from this perspective, sometimes we think yes. What has happened today is something that all Americans and many foreigners live with day in and day out. And although there might not be heavy street fighting or heavy shelling, it does not take away the fact that these things can happen anyway. And sometimes there's just a feeling that these things aren't getting out.
Bonnie Anderson in Beirut, terrific job all morning long. Thank you.